Well, good morning and welcome to Ethics Enhancing the Consumer Image. This is part one of a two-part session webinar and will be made available on demand for those who need it. My name is Frida MacArthur Lee and I'm with the University of North Texas Workplace Inclusion and Sustainable Employment, also known as UNT-WISE to most of our listeners today. We are part of the College of Health and Public Service located within the Department of Rehabilitation and Health Studies. For all of you joining us using the internet, take a look at that webinar control panel on the right side of your screen. There's a question box there. Please say hello to me. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a smiley face. Tell me that you can hear me. Let me know if you're having any trouble. Hi, Keely. I see you there. Anybody else out there? There we go. Thank you, Stephen. Perfect. If you have questions throughout this webinar, that is the box I need you to use. Type your questions in there and I will let our presenter know that you have questions. And I'll respond to you and let you know that I got your question as well, just so you don't think I'm ignoring you at any time. If you're calling in by phone only, please give us an email at untwise@unt.edu. I want to make sure you receive credit for your participation this morning. And at the end of the session, I'll provide you more information about part two of this webinar. But right now, what I want to do is I want to introduce our speaker. Our speaker this morning is Judith Getzow. Make sure I said that right. She is an instructor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. She has a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling and is a nationally certified rehabilitation counselor, also known as a CRC. Ms. Getzow is a PhD candidate in the Leadership Studies program at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, Texas. Her extensive experience in rehabilitation services includes support for persons with addictions, medical aspects of rehabilitation, disability awareness, and education in the prevention of violence against people with disabilities. She is known to her students as being fair and accommodating, going above and beyond to make sure that the materials are understood. And we couldn't be more pleased to have you here this morning, Judith. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. If you can, please let us know.
Everyone can hear you this morning,
Yes,
Judith.
okay, yay. I was telling Frida and Nick that a couple of, well, at least in one previous webinar, I started off with like a little song I was kind of singing. So no, this morning I won't do that, at least not right now. But welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. I want to say a special hello to Miss Keely Smith. She it was one of our students there at the rehab department at UTRGV, and it now works for the department and is a certified rehab counselor, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome, special hello to you. And please don't ask me any hard questions, Keely, because I know where to find you. So anyway, good morning, everyone. We will be discussing ethics this morning, again, enhancing the consumer image. So at any time, please feel free to ask questions, but that doesn't apply to Keely. Again, I'm just kidding. And jump in with any information, anything that you would like to share. I know I'm speaker this morning. However, I love participants to jump in and join us, and we all learn from each other. So by all means, please participate at any time. You're more than welcome. Okay, so to get started, our learning objectives for this webinar are: upon completion of this webinar, participants will be able to describe the ethical implications related to the image of the worker with the disability, and identify how support strategies can enhance or detract from the image of a worker with a disability. And so I'm going to cover those 2 points this morning. However, we have part 2 of this webinar scheduled for next Thursday, same time. So I hope you'll join us. And what I'll do is cover the next 2 objectives in part 2, which is develop simple tools for incorporating disability etiquette instruction in employment settings specific to individuals, and discuss the value of person-first language in all interactions, including those with employers. Okay, so to get started, um, when I conduct presentations, I know there's always someone that asks about statistics, or they want to see numbers. So for those of you that may be a numbers person, I included a little bit of statistics. And I always say I don't really do so throughout the presentation, only because to me, statistics is just a baseline. They're always changing. When we consider statistics of people with disabilities, we really have to stop and think about those that have not reported, or maybe don't even consider themselves to be a person with a disability. So it's a good number. When we look at statistics, it gives us a baseline, it gives us a good number. The research is very valuable, but at the same time, I always think, okay, these change so rapidly, and again, we need to consider how many are not included in a particular research study. So with that in mind, some statistics for people with disabilities. As reported by the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, Disease Control and Prevention, as of 2 years ago, there were 53 million people and adults in the United States living with a disability. Basically, 1 in every 5 adults, and I'm part of that number there. The most common functional disability type was a mobility limitation, defined as a serious difficulty walking or climbing stairs, reported by 1 in 8 adults, followed by disability in thinking and or memory, independent living, vision, and self-care. So when we're looking at this number from a rehab professional's perspective, let's look at and think about functional disability now that they're really looking at mobility limitation. Again, defined as serious difficulty walking or climbing stairs. That could be any one of us. And again, that is something that can progress very rapidly. I know in my case it did so. And a lot of times I stop and think, well, I'm not really, that's not really a disability, but it is. Now, from my perspective, I look at it that way. As far as my disability, I keep thinking, wait a minute, I can get around, I can walk, but it is a very important part of our stats of this research study, and something that we really need to consider when we're working with our consumers. The percentage of adults with select functional disability types. 13% of people with a disability have a mobility disability with serious difficulty walking or climbing stairs, as I mentioned. 10.6% of people with disability have a cognition disability with serious difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. 6.5% of people with disabilities have an independent living disability with difficulty running errands alone, visiting a doctor's office, or shopping. And again, when we think about our consumers, just giving you my experience, it's sometimes very hard to understand that, okay, I was able to do this, I was able to get to my medical appointments alone, now I can't. So again, when we're thinking about statistics, does the person really consider themselves to be part of this 6.5% or not? And 4.6% of people with a disability have a vision disability with blindness or serious difficulty seeing even when we're wearing glasses, and 3.6% of people with disabilities have a self-care disability with difficulty dressing or bathing. Okay, so disability and livelihood. We have found, CDC reported, that nearly half of those with an annual household income of less than $15,000 reported a disability. I'm not sure exactly, those of you that are joining us this morning, where you, the area that you're working in, part of Texas, or if you're in South Texas. I'm from South Texas, as is Keely, and we have such a big poverty area. And so when we're looking at annual household income of less than $15,000, and that person having a disability, that to me, when we're thinking about our consumers, I think, oh my gosh, a lot of times that is the person that is bringing in the income for the whole household. That's the person that is, they're relying on that money, and yet is dealing with a disability. So that's very common here in our area. My point being, and I'll get to, you'll see this in a few minutes, there's a great demand for rehab professionals. So if you haven't, I know sometimes students join us on these webinars. I encourage you, please think of becoming a VR counselor, working in the field, getting that certification, because you are in demand. You are very much in demand. 1 in 3 unemployed adults who are able to work reported disability, and 4 in 10 adults who have not completed high school reported disability. So again, I know that you work with or are trying to work with some of these people with disabilities, some of this population. Hopefully they will become consumers. We look at 1 in 3 unemployed adults who are able to work. Again, think of those that are out there that really have, for whatever reason, believed that I can't do anything anymore. I have a disability. I can't work anymore. Ethically speaking, we need to change that form of thinking, get that population in, get them to become consumers. We owe it to them as part of society to let them understand, to make them understand that they can become, a productive part of society and gain independence. I mean, I think of, again, unemployed adults who are able to work but aren't doing so. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're missing out on so much, not just financially, but the camaraderie that can be developed just by going out into the workforce. New experiences. We owe it to them. So again, as I mentioned, there's a demand for rehab professionals. There are different types, VR counselors. There's different work settings. We think of DARS, Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services, but also let's think of working with the population that have issues with substance abuse. You can be a rehab professional that decides to work in that specific area. So your skills, your education, maybe even counseling skills that you want to focus in on are extremely important. It's imperative that that you continue with that you always, as I say, hone your skills, because people like me, consumers, we need you. Okay, so questions so far? Any questions, comments, concerns?
No questions. Just, I'm sure you're aware of this, that DARS is no longer DARS. DARS is the Texas Workforce Commission. The Voc Rehab Services now is what they're referred to.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. And I believe most of our participants are employment specialists and employment professionals that are on the line. If you are not in that category, let me know so that Judith can know who she's speaking with. That's always a good thing to know. And I've had questions too about the PowerPoint, and I sent a message out. Want to make sure everybody saw that. The presentation day is on that webinar control panel under handouts. So if you are trying to read or follow along on your own pace, please download those, and they're accessible there. So there you go.
And thank you for correcting that. I call in to my VR counselor, and I text his workforce and I put DARS. I'm so sorry. That's just the old rehabber in me. Okay, so let's look at what rehabilitation is. When we talk about rehab, and I know this is information that is pretty much going to sound redundant to you, but let's just go over it. Let's really stop and think about rehab. It's a philosophy. It's a concept, a discipline, and of course a service delivery system when we're talking about, again, working with our consumers, talking about VR counselors. So it's that service delivery system, but let's go back to the philosophy, okay? Let's think about that. I think when, again, we get so used to saying we're part of rehab, but we can kind of get to where we really don't stop and consider the philosophy of it. So rehab refers to the process of restoring individuals with disabilities to their fullest levels of functioning and independence possible. And I know with my VR counselor, she gets so good at doing what she does. And this is something, again, ethically speaking, that we have to keep in mind is that, we can get so used to helping that and doing what we are supposed to do that we really kind of may not stop to think, oh my gosh, I'm really helping to restore this individual's fullest level of functioning. We see them out in the workforce, but let's stop and think about how great that is, how great of work that you're doing. Seeing someone go from maybe being at home, again, thinking, well, I have a disability, but I can't work. I'm able to work, but I'm unemployed. I can't, I'm not going to take that step, to getting them to become independent and have that confidence to do so. I mean, I think, again, from my, just speaking to you as a consumer, that just meant the world to me. So I'm very grateful for my VR counselor and for those that believed in me. Rehab reflects the basic values of our society. So we're looking at this from the perspective of it being a societal response. So we see the expressions of public support and services for people with disabilities. So it's no longer looking at this person cannot and should not go out and become independent. Again, a lot of times, we see paternalism come into play where somebody's thinking, well, no, they can't do this when they're really not given a chance. So just this fact that society has changed gives so many people a different form of life, a different outlook on life. And rehab reflects values. So we're going to talk about values in a few minutes, but again, think about what you do on a daily basis, those values that come into play, not just the values that society places on work. Yes, that's important, but again, look at how that particular value helps persons with disabilities to become more independent. Rehab provides supports. We talked about counseling, local job searches, job training, and other individualized services, and of course, medical and psychological services. And we're used to dealing with people with disabilities, but a lot of times when I speak to, just in general, general conversations with maybe people that don't really know me, or that we get to talking about rehab or disability, they tend to think, oh, rehab, it's related to addictions. And that's part of it too. So again, I want to encourage you, if maybe you decide to become a rehab counselor if you're not already, and those of you that are, if you decide maybe to work with a different population, addictions counseling, again, that's a field that always needs professionals as well. Empowerment of people with disabilities, we've talked about that. You help us to make informed choices, build viable careers, and of course, live more independently in the community. And that's not just you passing on that information as ethically we're supposed to do, but it's also you taking part in the continuing education, such as these webinars that are offered by UNT-WISE, and having programs as UNT-WISE develop and encourage others through the education that they provide. That helps us to, again, think, inspire, accomplish, and motivate not just ourselves, but others as well, and that being people with disabilities. So again, it's all a philosophy. Philosophy being assumptions and beliefs about life, human beings, and nature of human existence, how we view our relationship to ourselves and others. So we may always think, in rehab mode, as I call it, be in rehab mode. But what I'd like for you to do is think about that philosophy, how you view your relationship with yourself, knowing yourself. Because if we don't know ourselves, if we're not in tune, how are we ethically going to be in tune with others that we're trying to help? Okay, so again, our philosophy, our values, our morals, very, very much come into play with our ethics. So rehab philosophy, there's many disciplines, as I mentioned. For example, those that have been our rehab students go off and maybe don't work as a VR counselor, but they work as occupational therapists, physical therapists. And I, for one, love that, because it's a different perspective that they have. They have that rehab background, that philosophy of not just trying to help the person feel better and maybe be able to function a little bit better, but they instill that independence and that ethic of you can work, you can be productive, you can do more things than perhaps you think you can. So it's a different philosophy that they have other than just the medical perspective. And of course, the psychological perspective, we focus on the assets, not on the limitations of ourselves and of course others. Get the people with disabilities to see the self-fulfilling prophecy, and of course advocate for the inclusion of people with disabilities in including them in rehab, and again being their advocates. So rehab, basically more so today than before, is a very holistic approach. There's less of an individual problem and medical mode that we're looking at and dealing with. Now we're looking at a societal mode where we promote that independence and accessibility. So just very quickly, think about your own philosophy. Talk to me about what your philosophy is.
We'll give folks a few minutes to type a response in the question box there of what is your philosophy of rehab. Doesn't have to be long, just tell me what you think.
or any questions, comments, concerns at any time?
I'm not getting anything yet. I can share what you said in the last there of the holistic. I think you have to look at the entire picture. You just can't take a piece of the pie out and say, this is what we're going to work on today. I think you have to look at absolutely every aspect of the person's life, whether you're an employment professional, whether you're a VR counselor, educator. I think it has to be the entire concept, that person-centered plan. We're getting them. They're coming in here. Focus on abilities and not disabilities. Every person is employable. You have to have all the pieces to really be able to help them with their needs and wants. My philosophy is that everyone has strengths, and that is what should be focused on. I believe every individual has a unique set of strengths and values, no matter their current life circumstances. I use a very holistic approach using positive psychology methodologies. Focus on what can be done, not on what can't be done. Great words. Thank you all for sharing.
Yes, thank you so much. Beautiful. You know, and I know everyone has their work cut out for them, because when you see someone that has a disability but really doesn't have enough confidence, and I hate to say that, but you know, a lot of times they start thinking on, okay, how am I going to deal with this disability? If they've recently became a person with a disability, they're dealing with that. And so it's easy to forget, okay, I can do this. You know, I can work. I can have a life after this. So I know, you know, you were talking about the positive, you know, that type of psychology, focusing on that. It's extremely important, and I know you have your work cut out for you. I'm going to touch base just very quickly on people with addictions. I would sit in group counseling, and I would listen to those in recovery. And again, you know, looking at it from a disability perspective, and I think, oh my gosh, if you only could see your potential, if you only just try, just take one step in a positive direction, and have that confidence, you know, and believe that somebody's there to help you. And again, in our case, it's the rehab professional. Somebody's there to help you. Your life would change. So I know you have your work cut out for you. And again, I thank those of you that work in this field, in this profession. Great philosophy. Now, let me share a little bit of my philosophy, a little bit more. Again, I'm a student of leadership studies, and I firmly believe this is part of our philosophy. We don't talk about it. We don't discuss leadership. And if we do, you know, when we're talking to rehab students, we don't discuss it enough. But leadership is such a big factor in what you do. And I firmly believe that servant leadership is in a sense built into each and every one of us, because I see that in the rehab professionals. And again, I'm so thankful for it. Servant leadership. Kind of sounds like an oxymoron, because people think, wait a minute, how can I be a leader if you want me to be a servant? Well, think about what you do. You serve so many people, but yet you're their leader. You're our leader. They see that leadership skill in you, and that motivates them to want to do the same. And maybe not all consumers are that way, but you know, I truly believe that with your servant leadership, you'll get them there. I know, I see it. I know that's possible. So again, servant leadership is not about I, nor is it about we, but it's about them. our consumers. So servant leadership begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve to make sure other people's highest priority needs are being met. Now, you know, when I worked at the rehab department, if a student came in and asked me, well, you know, I'm interested in enrolling in rehab services, you know, and getting my degree in rehab services. And these were usually undergrads, of course. And I would think, they would ask me, how much am I going to earn? Be kind of like, nope, that's not the way we think about rehab. Good question, but no. You have to have a passion. You have to have a passion for what you're doing and for serving others, or we wouldn't be in this field. So servant leaders are selfless, empathetic, resolute, virtuous, authentic, needful, and thorough. And that is in line with our code of ethics. So, you know, again, when you're thinking about philosophy, I hope that you include servant leadership in that, or contemplate that, because you do exemplify servant leadership, even if you haven't thought about it. And if you're out there and you teach, if you're an educator or you're around rehab students, talk to them about this. Have them think from this perspective. Include this in the rehab philosophy. So the characteristics of servant leaders: you listen first. And again, if you're, you know, in counseling and VR counseling, I'm sure you go through this every single day, but maybe, you know, with the hustle and bustle of everyday life and work, it's easy not to focus on how much you really do. That listening, that empathy, healing. When you think about your consumers, listening to them and understanding the hurt that they may be going through, whether physically, emotionally, and trying to deal with that awareness of your physical, social, and political environments. And you, again, we look at that pretty much on a daily basis because we're advocates. So advocating for change, advocating for the changes in the architectural barriers, for example, attitudinal barriers. That persuasion, you persuade by the use of gentle, non-judgmental argument to create change. Think about those consumers that say, no, I don't want to do this, or I'm not happy with this part of my rehab plan. And you know that would help them, but yet you can't say, do it this way. But that gentle persuasion that comes about for that change. That conceptualization, you look at the big picture. You have that foresight to present that plan for the future. That stewardship, you take responsibility for what you've done, what you need to do. Take responsibility for someone else's life, basically, to get them to change. And that commitment to your consumers, and of course, building a community, because if we don't if there's no inclusion of people with disabilities, how can we build a community then? How can they become part of our community? So again, ethics defined. It's concerned with the kinds of values and morals an individual or society ascribes as desirable or appropriate, focuses on the virtuousness of individuals and their motives, deals with right versus wrong, but ethical theory, we're looking at ethical theory. It provides a system of rules or principles as a guide in making decisions about what is right and wrong and good and bad in a specific situation. And it provides a basis for understanding what it means to be a morally decent human being. But our own personal ethics, again, think about not just your philosophy, but your own personal ethics, must include honesty, respect and honor, fairness. And if you think about servant leadership, again, very much comes into play, very much um, on the same, on the same field as our rehab philosophy, our servant leadership, and our ethics, our code of ethics. So in our code of ethics, basically, those of you that have joined me before will see that these are my trusty slides when I talk about ethics. I always refer to these slides and to these sections of our code of ethics. The Section A1, welfare of those served by rehab counselors. So what is the primary responsibility of rehab counselors and service providers? What is the primary responsibility? And if you have any questions about what I've touched on or any comments, you can add them here as well.
We have a couple comments, and these were back to the original question, and it ties right into what you're talking about with servant leadership. A person's their own rehab philosophy sent this in, providing a secure environment for an individual to disclose information about themselves with an understanding that we are working together to enhance their quality of life, in my case by accessing work. Others, it may be educational goals, etc. Another comment is that if you are providing services through VR, you are teaching. And I so agree with that. I teach those classes. Everything in VR now is an educational base. You're not just finding someone a job. You're teaching them how to write a resume, how to interview. You are an educator as an employment professional. The answers to the most recent questions, primary responsibilities are promote the goals of the consumer. Any more coming in? Don't worry about misspelled words. I misspell all the time. So if you type fast, go for it. I'm always in the best interest of the consumer for the better way of life.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Great answers. And I want to touch on that, that about education. Oh, yes. Yes. Not only are you a servant leader, but you're an educator. Absolutely. Because yes, we do have to teach how to write a resume, for example, or maybe even how to budget, you know. If by some chance your consumer has their own, they're already independent enough to have their own checking account or open one up, but are not used to that, maybe that's a first step for them, teaching them about budgeting, about writing checks, and or using online services, banking services, things of that nature. Just sometimes what we take for granted and what we think is just a basic everyday activity, having to educate them about that. Oh yes, very much so. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have just a few more here. I hate not to share when they type such great information. Protect their dignity, talking about the responsibilities, and listen to the consumer, promote autonomy, independence, and I agree with you about being a teacher and a mentor. So
yes, absolutely. Awesome. Great answers. Thank you so much. I love when there's participation. Okay, so the primary responsibility of rehab counselors as told by the Code of Ethics, as stated by the Code of Ethics, is to respect the dignity and to promote the welfare of clients. Yes, absolutely. And again, you do that by relying on your own philosophy, knowing your values, your morals, and being a servant leader. And also looking at the rehab counseling plan, working with your consumer, not on your own, but including them. And when paternalism comes into play, or even culture, as you'll hear me discuss in a few minutes, it can be a little hard to do that with your consumer. But again, we are ethically bound to work towards that independence and let the consumer be a part of that rehab plan. The employment needs, working with clients to consider employment, of course, and that autonomy. Um, Counselors respecting the rights of clients to make decisions on their own behalf. Respecting culture. Rehab counselors demonstrate respect for the cultural background of clients, and again, in our area, in South Texas, it's, extended family very much comes into play with in the culture here. I mean, so much so where maybe even godparents are, the compadres, the madrina, the padrino, are involved in the decision making of the consumer. So, we have to think about that and respect that, but yet fight for that autonomy, that independence. And of course, non-discrimination, not condoning or engaging in discrimination. So being that advocate and avoiding value imposition. So we have to be very aware of our own values and morals, but at the same time, not impose them. Values being personal core beliefs, the desires of how the world should be. Those are not very objective. And again, coming from a person with a disability, I prefer that they be very much, that your values be very much a little, assertive versus objective when it comes to accessibility, because you're the one that's out there advocating for me and others with disabilities. So having that value, that core belief of, wait a minute, our world should be more accessible, not having to have this person with a disability wait just to enter a building or find another way to access a restaurant because they don't, have a way to accommodate people with disabilities, for example. So when we think about values, we need to consider why they're important to us and why. I'm sorry, what is important to us and why? What's important to us and why? They're influenced by our cultural beliefs, our background, our experiences, and they determine our beliefs, our behavior, and our interactions with others. So it's important to know and understand our own values and to help, in order to help the consumers clarify theirs. But at the same time, we have to be value neutral. We can't impose them, but we have to also teach, again, that goes back to education, teach our consumers that, about values. Let them find and understand what their own values are. They may not know. They may not know. Or again, looking at people with addictions, they may have lost those values and those morals. So how do we teach them? How do we get them to understand them and yet be value neutral? Because ethically, we have to be. Again, we can't impose our own values. So values can be used to characterize attitudes that we then get, the attitudes that become part of our daily lives, our way of thinking, and of course those of our consumers. So morals, that deals with human obligation, describes whether an action is right or wrong, and again, it's based on personal beliefs. Good or bad actions are the right or wrong actions. Morals are generally taught by the society to the individual, whereas values come from within. So again, morals generally taught by society, but values come from within. So let's stop and think about how, for example, how we were raised. What made you become a rehab counselor, a rehab professional? What are the values and the morals that are a part of you and a part of your philosophy, your ethics, that got you to be a rehab professional. You'll share those with me.
We have some folks typing. I'm waiting. I'll start. I think our morals, where they come from, is obviously, as you said, how you're raised. I'm a military brat. I'm retired military, so a lot of that is discipline, protection, helping others. That is where I came from. We're getting responses here of I love helping people. The protection of others, I think, is a big one that's coming up here. Any more? Dead air. We don't like dead air. Come on. Let me know.
I'll start singing. You don't want me to start singing.
There we go. Again, more helping people, protecting people, wanting to serve, desire to serve, make a difference in people's lives, being able to help someone reach their full potential. Yes, absolutely.
I like that, protecting people. And I'll just share a little bit, not that, I want to tell you my whole life story, but I always remember this one friend that I had. Her name was Wendy, and she wasn't, this was when I was in 5th grade. And, that was like just a few years ago. No, just kidding. But Wendy had a hearing impairment. She was a person with a hearing impairment. And she was at our school for I want to say maybe just half a year, and I was always raised to be that type of person that would help others, never judgmental. If somebody had a disability, it wasn't anything that you looked at or questioned or you just accepted it. That's just the I was taught that we're all alike, okay, whether you have a disability or not. So I remember, of course, making friends with Wendy right away, and my best friend at the time didn't like that, and she was like, okay, well, if you're going to play with her, we can't understand what she says. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, I can't believe you're saying this. And so I would, in a sense, protect her. Not that she needed that protection. She could, very well take care of herself. But it's just that, that wanting to ostracize her, and that those values, those morals that I was raised with, where it's like, no, this is still someone that can be your friend. This is still someone that you can learn to understand. Maybe doesn't communicate exactly like you, but hey, while you're not learning sign language, I am, So again, it's that instinct to accept, protect, not judge. So I'm glad that those were part of my values, my morals as well, and that's why I'm in the rehab field.
We've had a few more come in there while you were talking, Judith. A combination of helping, coaching, educating consumers and employers. I like the employer side. Believe in their potential so they can believe in themselves too. I am a retired teacher and I enjoy teaching people to gain job skills and advocating for them. And this one says, I was told I could not do it. I refuse to let society tell individuals with disabilities be told they can't do it. So.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. I know when you hear you can't do this, or you can't walk, or you can't, it's getting gaining that confidence and saying, watch me, I can. And then sharing that with others. Absolutely. And, I don't think that that's imposing our values and our morals, but that's sharing. We can stay, as I mentioned, value neutral, you'll see here on the slide, but yet we can pass on what that knowledge and the values and the morals that we've gained, and yet stay value neutral, if that makes sense. That's almost like being a servant leader, that oxymoron. But I think we can do it, and we do it. We need to do it. We're ethically bound to do that. And of course, advocacy and accessibility is a big part of our code of ethics. as are the principles of ethical behavior, autonomy, veracity, fidelity, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. We've touched base on these. I think we've already discussed in several ways what they mean in general. That respecting the rights of clients, doing good to others, and you've given examples. That's one of my favorite pictures there, seeing someone on the beach in a wheelchair. I love it. That's independence. And fidelity, being faithful, keeping promises, and honoring that trust placed in us as rehab professionals. And justice, being fair in the treatment of all consumers and providing appropriate services to everyone. And of course, not doing harm to others. Our prime purpose in this life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them, as the Dalai Lama said. And veracity, being honest, having candor, and telling the truth. So that makes the rehab philosophy, rehab in general, you being that leader, that servant leader with ethics and morals and values, makes up the rehab professional or the rehab counselor. Only because you're called a VR counselor, only because full-time multitasking ninja is not an actual job title yet. Okay, and the ethical implications related to the image of the worker with a disability. I saw Nemo's dad there, that little picture of Nemo's dad. You think you can do these things, but you just can't, Nemo. Again, we're talking about, being told you can't do this, or the consumer thinking, I can't, maybe because that's what they've heard, or that's just what they've started to believe now that they have a disability. So their attitude, the attitude of the person with a disability, oh my gosh, that can become such an ethical implication that's related to their image. Again, if it's that first time that they're taking that step to work, maybe still not having that confidence. So, their attitude is a little different. We need to change that, make it a little bit more positive. Let them know that they can believe in themselves. And we talked about societal attitudes, the negative attitudes and behaviors that have existed in all cultures regarding people with disabilities or disabilities in general. That has always been the rule, not the exception. It's what society thinks. And now, again, as I mentioned, that's changing. We're getting society to think we need to be accepting of everyone, and every place should be accessible. Everything that should just be first thought. If someone is opening up a business, that should be the first thought. If someone is building a restaurant, or anything, that should be their first thought. And complete accessibility, not, oh yes, I can get a wheelchair into my business, but my place of business, but wait a minute, can the person in the wheelchair move around? It's not that they can just get in the door, but can they move around? Hey, that should be the way society thinks. We're working on that, but we still have a lot more work to do. So basically having society not view people with disabilities as different. The minority group status that has been placed on people with disabilities tends to also, I guess on one hand, it can help because, for example, the deaf community, when they're looked at as a minority group, those of us in our profession we respect that. we know that's a different community, that's a different culture, and we learn about that. So that's the pros. The cons are that in general, people with disabilities are looked at as a minority and treated as a minority. And that has an impact on the quality of life because we can be seen as being deviant. Um, Still, we're looked at as, okay, the physical appearance being an important part. We live in a society that focuses on body beautiful, body beautiful. Well, just because someone's in a wheelchair or has to use crutches doesn't mean that 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 is not body beautiful. Okay, but still, because of certain aspects of our society, our culture, we're seen as deviant. That physical appearance plays a big role. Um, and also in the workplace, not just in society, but in the workplace. That functioning, the intelligence, emotional stability, the behavior of a person with a disability can have implications on the image of that worker with a disability if people don't understand. So disabilities are seen as self-imposed. For example, drug abuse are less accepted. And those that are less visible, the disabilities that are less visible are more accepted, and people tend to think, or some people tend to think, well, it wasn't your fault. You were in a car accident and you couldn't help it. You ended up with a disability, becoming disabled, or a person with a disability, for example. And so that's more readily accepted versus someone that was using drugs and then ended up in an accident and becoming a person with a disability. Okay. Ethnicity and gender are often an additional factor. Women, more so women from a minority group that also have a disability, experience triple the discrimination. And again, that relates to the image of the worker with a disability. Let's think about work in general. Let's think about businesses. Women are still fighting to, break the glass ceiling. We heard that with Hillary Clinton. I've broken the glass ceiling. Okay, but let's think of women with disabilities and that come from a minority group. That's even harder. And again, that affects their image because they are a worker with a disability that's experiencing all of that. Questions, comments, concerns so far?
No, and we're real close to time here too, because we just have the 1 hour today. Do you want to finish up attitudes and then we'll stop there and pick up next week? Okay, great.
Yes, absolutely. So again, we are an overlooked minority. Disability is often synonymous with helplessness, dependency, and passivity, and there's fragmentation of power. Sometimes, even as adults, it can be looked at as dependent children, not equals, and needing treatment, not rights. So we're dealing with that, and again, ethically speaking, we need to eliminate that way of thinking, not be like Nemo's dad there, but recognize that we are an overlooked minority and that should not be dealt with in the workplace. I mean, a person with a disability, a worker with a disability should be seen just as a worker, someone that is able to do the job and be given that opportunity. So that discrimination and assumptions about the disability that people still have, unfortunately, we need to look at are reasonable accommodations provided, misinterpreting inclusion and integration. Ethically speaking, we need to look into that. Are we getting people to work, having people with disabilities work, but is a true reasonable accommodation provided? is there true inclusion, or are they being made to work at different hours to separate them from the rest of the coworkers, maybe intentionally or unintentionally? Again, those are some of the ethical implications that we need to look at when it comes to workers with disability. Job performance of the worker with a disability, are they held to the same standards as others? Not just given excuses as far as their conduct. Oh, well, it's because of their disability, or they can't perform the job as well because of their disability. That's just unethical. They're not being given the same opportunity or being held to the same standards as others. Questions, comments, concerns?
I just have one talking about quality of life is what it's all about.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Bettering that quality of life, yes.
That's it.
And not,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, not just outside of the workplace, but definitely in the workplace, to better that image of the worker with the disability, to give them that chance.
Definitely. Okay. So I think we're at our time right now, everybody, and we've had great participation. That is so wonderful that we're doing that, and it's only an hour. I wish we had 30 more minutes to continue here, because I'm getting great participation, and if I didn't get to your comments, I am sorry, but just a fabulous, fabulous group this morning. We appreciate that so much. And Judith, as usual, great information from you.
Well, thank
we
you.
look forward. You're welcome. We look forward to the second part of the webinar. We record this and we'll put it up online on the on-demand. So if you want to go back and you want to look at something, you also have the handouts, and we'll use those same handouts next time as well. The next one is scheduled for August 10th. Next Thursday, we will be at the same place here. We're going to send out a reminder to everyone that's participating this morning with that link. And then after the second one is when you'll get your evaluation. So don't look for an evaluation for this one. It'll be after the second one. And as always, CRC offers CRC credit. So if you do need that, give us a heads up so that we can get that ready for you for next time. Getting great comments here, Judith, that they really enjoyed your presentation and looking forward to next week. If you think of any questions along the way, please let us know. And Judith, do you have anything else?
Oh, not at all. I just look forward to next week's webinar. And thank you so much. Thank you, Frida and Nick, and those of you that participated. I so appreciate the questions, the comments, the feedback. Thank you so very much. You make my job easier.
That's what we want to hear. Perfect. Well, great. Well, I hope everybody has a great day and a great week, and we will see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.